Train the muscles, not the joints.
Welcome back to Natural Gland Bodybuilding Mountain. And today I thought I'd talk about 3 ways that I'm actually getting gains now in a new way that I haven't had before from just a few adjustments. 3 things that I'm doing for this. So the first thing that I talk about all the time is about using the range of motion or technique which keeps the tension on the muscles for you. Now that by no means excludes full range of motion for some movements, right? Some movements you're going to find that full range of motion works great, and sometimes you're going to find that you either need to adjust the movement, maybe in the way that you're doing it, or you need to adjust into a more partial form in order to get the greatest result on the muscle that you're trying to hit, right? So depending on how you're built, depending on what exercise you're doing, will depend greatly on how these adjustments should play out, and only through experimentation on your own will you find out. So one thing I find a lot of people don't realize is that even though you perform a certain exercise, there's more than one way to perform that exercise, even for you, to get results in different areas. So don't be afraid to change up the way that you're performing an exercise in order to get more results. So if you've been doing a certain exercise the same way for a long period of time, and then you start to get joint aches or pains, right? Or you start to stagnate in your results, there is a possibility that you need to change the way you're doing that exercise and use that variation for a period of time before coming back to the original. Or maybe you just need to refine your technique in order to have a better form of that exercise for you and your individual situation. So case in point, I've been bench pressing my whole life. Not my whole life, but ever since I started training when I was 13 years old, I started bench pressing. That was one of the first exercises I started with, that and chin-ups. And I noticed that there's a certain way that I've been bench pressing most of my life that has worked very well. But of course, there are certain things that happen in life, such as, I got a few hockey injuries, like I dislocated this shoulder and tore this rotator cuff and stuff. And so my delts started to take over the movement quite a bit. So sometimes, this is another point, sometimes the old form that you're using does not serve you in the same way anymore, and you need to make adjustments as your body changes or as things happen to your body over time. Life, right? Who can prevent it? It just, sometimes stuff happens that's beyond your control, and you need to make adjustments based on that. Now here's the technique that I've been using for years, and it served me great, like I said, when I didn't have my shoulder injuries and stuff, and it is the best way for me to do the powerlifting maneuver, to put the stress as much on the chest as possible, along with, of course, getting some stress on the delt and the tricep. As you notice, I'm tucking the elbows to make it safe for the pec tendons and everything, but I'm not touching my chest. And that's an adjustment I had to make because when I touch my chest using this form, I overstimulate my delts. So that's why I do that. It's not because I'm trying to ego lift or anything like that. But the truth is that I'm getting a certain amount of chest development from this, but it's not quite complete, and that is why I had to adjust the technique, at least for a period of time, just to see if I can address some other weak links that may be going on. So one thing that I did that has gotten me gains in my chest area quite dramatically in a really fast period of time, it's actually, I've only been using this variation of the bench press for this last month, is the flared elbow technique with lighter weights. Now I always say never use this technique with heavier weights, but I have been doing the flared elbow technique with the chest, bringing the bar more to the upper chest rather than to the sternum that I usually do like a powerlifter. And I've been getting dramatic chest gains from it, mostly in the mid to upper chest area. The thickness has actually been quite dramatic. Honestly, it's astounding because I've been training for a long time and I don't really get results in certain areas. There's been certain results that I've gotten and then certain places seem to stagnate. The chest area has been one place that I've struggled no matter how much weight I lifted and whatever, and this exercise has been producing results in spades. So this is the more flared elbow technique that I'm using, and you'll notice where the bar travels, it travels more to the mid of my upper chest. And it's not over my throat, of course, right? But it's more above that triangle. The top of the triangle there of the mountain shirt, you can see it in the mirror there. You can see where the bar is traveling. Now, usually it's much lower on my torso than that when I'm doing the powerlifting technique or if I'm lifting heavier. Now that, of course, is going to stimulate a lot of delts. It's going to take a bit of the pecs out of the movement, but it's, of course, safer when it comes down to pec injuries and so forth. But the fact is that by isolating the pec muscle this way and by flaring those elbows, I've noticed growth in an area where I've had challenges just because of the hockey injuries that I received many years ago, right? So because my delts have a tendency to take over, I have to develop a technique to make sure that they're no longer taking over in the movement now. So yeah, sometimes you've got your own specific situation that you have to cater your technique to. So the bottom line is that just by one minor adjustment, using a wider grip and bringing the bar straight down like this instead of like this, has dramatically changed what muscles are being fired during the movement and what muscles are actually hitting failure. So this is one adjustment that I made that has given me dramatic chest results right now. And also when I'm doing the dumbbell presses, I'm also using a little bit lighter weight. I'm still using 105-pound dumbbells, right? But I'm not bringing the elbows in and the elbows tuck. I'm actually keeping it flared. Now, again, I'm making sure that I can do a lot of reps with this movement before I use any sort of given weight, because it is more of a lighter weight type movement. Otherwise, it's dangerous on the pec tendons. And I'm also making sure that I'm dramatically warmed up before I do those movements, right? Sometimes I use an extra couple warm-ups and pause reps and everything with lighter weight, make sure I'm stretched out, make sure everything feels good before I start doing that movement. So some techniques, even though they can work better for you, may be more aggressive on the body. So you want to make sure that you take that into consideration when warming up. Sometimes you need to do a more dramatic warm-up than maybe when you're doing another type of exercise. Now the next movement that you'll notice if you watch me on video that I'm doing differently than usual is, funny enough, the squat, right? Now the squat has many different techniques, kind of like the deadlift. The deadlift has different techniques, right? But if you squat the same way for a long period of time, you're going to notice that you may develop some sort of overuse injuries, or you may notice that certain areas of your leg and butt and hamstring and lower back are developing, and maybe some areas are not. Now one sign to watch for that will signify that you need to change your technique or at least adjust something for a period of time to address any sort of weak links and stuff is if you're getting knee pain or aches and pains in a certain area. Now my knees were getting pretty tight over the last few years and I was like, okay man, my knees are tight all the time, what the hell, right? So I'd have to cater my workouts all the time and I was keeping my stance usually the same width, if not maybe, you know, a variation of an inch or two one way or another, right? I was doing a fairly medium stance when it comes down to squats and I was getting some sort of knee issues. So one thing I found lately was that if I go wider in my stance, of course it puts more of the stress on the hip, but it also stretches out the adductors along with the glutes, and at the same time I'm able to go lower in the squat, which, you know, makes people on the internet really happy, right? Because they don't care about what width you do or what, as long as you're going close to parallel, then somehow you meet their approval, right? But I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it in order to open up the energy in that area as far as stretch out the muscles and address any weak links. So because I was using a certain stance for a period of time, there are certain muscles that may have gotten tightened up and certain muscles that may have gotten developed, and then other muscles that were not developed. So just by changing something as simple as the width of the stance, I'm able to get a better stretch in different areas with less tension on the knees. So from doing this stance, I'm noticing I'm getting a little bit more muscle tone in the legs. My rectus femoris in the quadricep is developing better. My adductors are developing quite dramatically, along with the hamstrings, funny enough, and the butt, right? So right now I'm wearing shorts, but it feels like they just got like too tight. It's like I'm wearing spandex, even though they're canvas khaki kind of shorts. So it's really annoying finding pants, honestly. Let me know, guys, what you guys wear for pants, because I'm having a hard time finding good stuff. So maybe one day I'll get a good sponsor on this channel that actually makes decent clothing for guys who want to have muscle instead of just be skinny bastards. So from doing this new technique, I'm getting a better stretch in new areas, and I'm also strengthening certain areas which were not getting addressed from the old form, right? And now it doesn't mean the old form was wrong, it just means now I'm strengthening up some other weak links that may have been established from not using these different muscles for a long time. And I'm also using a technique which is basically taking the tension off any sort of tender areas. So there's a good possibility that now my medialis is getting a little bit more affected in a positive way in the quadriceps, so therefore it is also helping with pumping blood flow and keeping the patella tendon tracking properly over the knee. So I'm getting way less tension in that area and more comfort, but I'm able to push the muscle deeper into failure, which is the most important thing, right? If you're having joint pain or you're having any sort of joint issues, you're not going to be able to push the muscles as deep into failure, and therefore you're not going to get the same results. So yeah, that's the second thing that I've done, the second exercise that I've changed. Now the third thing I've done Third thing I've done is with bicep curls, I'm just using super lightweight right now, like super light for barbell curls, and I'm just keeping the elbows back and I'm just pumping as many reps as I can. Sometimes I'm only using 45 to 65 pounds. Like that's how light I'm talking. And I'm just pumping as many reps as I can. Now, if I get 60, 70 or 100 reps or whatever, I don't care. I'm just trying to get that one muscle to hit failure. I don't care if I even swing a little bit at the end just to get those extra few reps to get the deeper burn happening. But from doing this, I'm noticing I'm getting these monster pumps and great isolation of the muscle, which is really important when it comes down to stimulating the muscle into muscular growth. So a lot of times when you're doing heavier weight, you'll notice that you may get the brachialis involved, or you may get the shoulder involved, or you may get a number of different muscles involved, but you might not be getting the brachii involved. There's a possibility that sometimes that's sitting in the background because the forearms start to take over. So because of this light weight, I'm able to keep that tension on there and take the bicep in a deep, blood curdling type of painful failure. But from doing that, I'm actually getting these monster pumps, and it's fun to train too, right? So really the third thing I've done is adjusted my bicep training technique, but really what I've done mainly as the overarching sort of thing is adjusted the movements so that there's less pain and more fun and more ability to feel muscles that I want to hit that have not been hit enough lately. So from doing these three adjustments, I'm getting massive growth. And I'd suggest that if you need to make adjustments in your training, they might not be the same adjustments that I'm making, but just from making some minor adjustments to your technique, such as just grip width on the bench, or traveling maybe lower in your chest or up or higher in your chest, or maybe squatting, you need to adjust to a narrower stance or a wider stance. Like either way, just the adjustment itself is sometimes enough to stimulate a new area and create new amounts of gains for you, along with rehabilitate any sort of injuries or overuse sort of problems that have developed in the area. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you. These are three major things that I'm doing right now. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff I'm doing in my training, such as more volume, also not taking all my sets to failure. Sometimes I take them to failure, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just want to get the volume in and just get the perfection of the actual execution of the movement. And these are just some of the things that I'm doing right now that are actually really helping my training. So just because I've been training for a long period of time doesn't mean that I can't reinvent my way of experiencing my workouts and doing different stuff, which is also the basis of the Deload Bodybuilding Bliss program that I just wrote up and is on my website right now. Because basically what I did was I started with this type of program, and I did that for about 4 weeks, and then I pushed myself back into some sort of 2-day split program. And that's basically really been the launching pad for my new training techniques and stuff, is that I took time to re-look at everything and to train and perfect my technique and really establish my mind-muscle connection in a new way. And then after that, then I pushed into the 2-day split sort of thing. So if you haven't tried my Deload Bodybuilding Bliss training program, I highly recommend you try it if you're hitting this sort of wall or this plateau in your training. And then from there, you can move into something more intense, but you're going to be starting with a renewal in your technique and a renewal in how you're experiencing training. Mountain. So yeah, I hope this helps out in your training. Thanks a lot for watching. If you need to get a hold of me, just go to naturalgalantbodybuilding.com, and thanks to the Patreon supporters, and take care for now.